Ape Escape is your problem, an action game that's your responsibility. Pop the disc into your PlayStation, and the first thing you're informed about is that your main opponent, and mess to clean up, is born in front of your very eyes, an unfathomable swarm of semi-intelligent people monkeys. To think, if this game wasn't made, no one would think to do something as careless as leaving an advanced helmet gizmo in the paws of an innocent albino monkey at a petting zoo, making him curious and devious enough to spread that forbidden gift to all his monkey brethren. But the game is here, the apes are on the loose and all over the cover and marketing, which consequently means so is the hypothetical job opening for the gamers to try to fix this. Apes are seizing our technology and threatening to ruin humankind, with no existing action game protag role model trained to stop a problem as insane as this. So when a kid, fresh off the playground, gets accidentally caught in the middle of the monkeys stealing a time-traveling machine, you bet your ass the elders that were initially responsible for this dilemma are not only going to try their best to save that boy from the depths of human history, but they'll also use this situation as an opportunity for monkey catching tutelage, putting them under their wing as the testing subject for the first ever people-monkey catcher role in action game history. When you start the first stage, the professor advises about an oversized net and stun club being transported with you and encourages you to give it a shot in trying to swipe some monkeys, which initially resembles a pretty straightforward game of monkey tag in a quaint backyard type setting. But that's the core gameplay and combat in the most ideal set of circumstances, because of course, the time periods you go through get larger in scope, more treacherous, and the monkeys start acting more sneaky and conniving. This job still has a few holes in its workflow, so new gadgets are immediately produced and wired to your location, ready to solve the current frontier of your journey. You reach a point of the opening prehistoric era where the land becomes marshy, filled with flooded bodies of lake water, and so you're gifted a water net to help you traverse those waters and make it possible to catch monkeys when they retreat underwater. You head into biomes where monkeys can hide in giant plants and where the land generally starts to become more segregated, divided by sub-areas that you can't preview from a distance, or even main areas that are so large in scope that you can't even draw the distance on sight. And the professor has a monkey radar ready to help you circumvent that hypothetical fog. As your journey gets steeper, wider, or when you just plain want to first-person aim at a monkey for once, your elders invent a doodad precisely engineered to scratch those itches. Right off the bat, one major element that sets Ape Escape apart from most action game campaigns is how you're intended to follow a strict progression. You don't start off with all your gadgets, and you're not allowed to catch every monkey at the start of a level. You obtain new gadgets at certain levels of your progression, and your mission in every new level is to collect a minimum number of monkeys before you're immediately exited out of the stage, which can admittedly feel pretty patronizing and limiting. Hell, every new gadget you obtain puts you in a mandatory tutorial segment before jumping into the actual level it's intended for. It does kind of suck to hear of a 3D collectathon platformer of this era where you don't immediately get to use your acrobatic or superpower talents. But my counter to this is, what talent? What acrobatics? This is a random kid learning to be an action game star for a problem that has never existed until now. Even as your arsenal of gadgets gets larger, nothing changes the reality that Spike is a very ordinary and fragile avatar to play as. The enemies he fights, the level design he traverses through, and just the structure of the adventure overall is not made to fully accommodate him. The people monkeys are like if Mario 64 Power Stars or Banjo Jiggies went through a mad scientist experiment where they grew legs, feet, and autonomy, where now it's not a matter of simply reaching the goal and running into them to snag them, but now you actively have to chase them down, stop them in their tracks, and apprehend them with a specific weapon. It's a collectathon that has combat because the combat is that you have to fight the collectibles, because the collectibles don't want you to catch match them. Levels are sprawling and perilous, often filled with tall cliffs, thin ledges, booby traps, and again, no draw distance for your puny, underdeveloped retinas. They're explorable biomes that you have to survive in spite of your curiosity. Not jungle gyms made for a perfectionist run, and not even an escape room where you can suss out solutions with patience. Because, monkeys and crap are coming at you from all different angles. Ape Escape is not a power fantasy. At times, it feels like it's designed to be the complete opposite. But for that matter, on the other hand, the tutorializing and drip feeding of your moveset here, I don't think is exactly done to handhold you. It's more made to be an action game about learning your responsibilities and limitations, and working with what you know in a hazardous and unpredictable environment, where you actually do end up growing some appreciation for how the game takes its time to teach you how to do things by the book. Because playing by the books in the actual worlds is far from the easiest thing to manage under so much pressure. For a cheeky cartoon game about silly monkeys and how stupid they make you look all game, Ape Escape might actually be in practice one of the most mature and professional action games you'll ever get to play. There's really no action game formula quite like it. In fact, its very existence is to destabilize a lot of what you may be familiar with when it comes to the classic superhero standard of free-form, expressive collectathons or more focused, inventory-based adventure games. Those adventures starred professionals, but Ape Escape very much wanted to humble the end of that decade by putting us in the shoes of a newbie, and also a newbie thrown into an absolutely clownish scenario that most action game protagonists would probably not have the standards to stoop themselves to. So the fact that it has this very patient learning curve angle to its campaign for an unforeseen hunting sport like this makes it one of the coziest and inviting campaigns to go through. It's an action game about uniquely testing your patience in handling a variety of problems, playing it smart to find a clear-cut solution. The professor and his lab assistant Natalie and AI informant Cassie form a seniority team made to rescue Spike, but above all, train him to make his own way back home and become as proficient of a monkey catcher as possible. Perhaps this is what lends the game its sci-fi aesthetics. The future and technology have stormed the comfy present, forcing everyone to strap in, ready or not. People monkeys and the albino turned evil named Spectre handle unfiltered technology and the future in a childish and careless manner, doing whatever they feel like in spite of the havoc and problems they cause behind them. But with the right head on your shoulders and some supportive circles, you can seize that impending future and use it as the boon for your self-development and professionalism, to mentor even schoolyard kids thrown into this role to become full-time experts of an authentic action game role like this. I think Ape Escape sells that idea pretty wholesale throughout the entire game. Both the look of the game, with its pretty impressive, explorable 3D environments, minus the draw distance, the kind of funny, cyborg kind of feel of the polygonal apes, and generally the way the game clashes organic nature with machinery and futuristic facilities and framing, and especially how it directs its music, where you very much get this polarizing but mesmerizing feeling of hybridization, being pulled between different moods, upbeat and calm, to dangerous and mysterious. At times, the tracks can feel like there are glitches or artifacts seeping into the sound, like you're illegally tapping into an ecosystem or problem as a trespasser that really shouldn't be sticking their nose into. But what compels you forward is a particular trance or momentous vibe that keeps you concentrated or in near perfect sync with the world and situation you're jumping into the simulation of. This is a journey where the future turns everything and everyone bananas, but you can keep it cool enough to maturely clean up the peels around you. Nothing, however, speaks to the idea of grappling and supporting yourself with surreal, futuristic technology than the actual way you play this game. This is one of the first games to feature the PlayStation's Dualshock controller, adding a second analog stick to gameplay. The left stick controls your character's movement like normal, but now the right stick is here to control the direction of whatever gadget is currently in Spike's hands. Swinging a net or a sword isn't done by pressing a face button. Attacking or targeting enemies is no longer about getting your character to face it. Here you have the freedom to aim attacks in all 360 degrees of possible rotation, which makes for an interesting catch to gameplay. You can run in one direction like usual, but now you're responsible for whatever direction you swing your weapon, regardless of what way you're moving with the left stick. And while this does technically mean more work to attack what's in front of you, now that you essentially have to push both sticks in the same direction, it does also give you the potential to flip your stance on the fly, to attack in a different opposing direction, which is pretty liberating and fun to get the hang of. It's a unique privilege to act beyond that classic video game contrivance of stiffly lining up your character in front of something and pressing a button to get them to interact with it. If something is running parallel or behind you, you can cut them off with a strike from your blind sides, which is pretty sweet when you get it to land. This also means some classic action game functions like dashing, hovering, or projectile shooting aren't built with an immediate button press, but now have to be revved up with the right motion of the right analog stick to get them running. You need enough centrifugal motion to use the dash hoop or the skyflyer. The monkey radar won't simply spot a monkey for you with a press of a button. You have to scout the right signal by pivoting the stick relative to your location. The first-person aiming of the slingback shooter even requires you to charge your pellet by holding back on the stick and releasing it to fire. There's an entire gadget that's virtually built like a second playable character, controlled in fluid motion with the second stick, while you still have control of Spike with the left stick. And the large vehicles you get to control in this game reconfigure both sticks as independent levers for the left and right motors of your vehicle respectively. Like I said, the main draw of Ape Escape's control gimmick here is that more effort and coordination is involved in using your weapons than your typical button-based action game, which puts more credence into the mandatory tutorial segments, since they all do have some unique procedure to use each of them properly with the right stick that you gotta learn the hang of the first few rounds. But altogether, it serves one bigger picture about Ape Escape and its overall style of play. You are responsible for everything you do in this game. There are no face buttons to comfortably attack with your character's front torso. There are no lock-on features to aim at things safely in a 3D space. And there are no UI graphics to give you any sort of visual clue or guideline of where your push of the right stick is going to land relative to where Spike is on camera. You might as well play Ape Escape with a VR headset strapped to your head or something, because the game is purely about trusting your instincts with your periphery, your hand-eye coordination when attacking with a weapon. This is yet another element that makes Ape Escape stand out from your typical action game. Most games start you out as pros. Ape Escape wants you to learn how it feels like to start from the bottom. Most action games have reliable, twitchy, reaction-based combat or gameplay flow. Ape Escape wants to stick you with more moments where you're unequipped or prone to whiff your weapon. When you introduce more degrees to a game's control, you also introduce several more degrees where things can more easily go wrong, where you'll flat out miss a cheeky monkey by a few centimeters simply because you didn't fling the stick exactly where they were coordinated. Ape Escape is not a very graceful action game, and this is even coming from somebody who's played it for years, because the game is simply not designed to always give you the most streamlined toolset for chaining or reacting to its challenges. That's not to say you can't make Ape Escape gameplay look slick and professional, you most certainly can, but a big caveat of this game is recognizing you have more room for error and require more practice when given the privilege of this much control in your hands, which you can argue has always been a caution of play from the moment 3D gameplay and the analog stick was standardized. But even most early 3D games had immediate functions and attacks to give them that snappy, arcadey feedback that most gamers are used to. Ape Escape really doesn't have anything like that. The most responsive actions in this game are jumping and crouching, arguably. It almost makes me surprised they didn't use the right stick to manipulate the tendons of Spike's legs or something. But I think it's this specific control gimmick that squarely marks Ape Escape's core gameplay and the legacy of its gameplay as one built for a specific learning curve and not really designed for anything really further beyond that. You'll see people styling at Mario 64 or strategizing and randomizing with Zelda or Resident Evil. You'll mostly see people tripping on their shoelaces while playing Ape Escape. Hell, there's no New Game Plus feature where you can play the campaign with all your gadgets unlocked or anything. You really do have to play Ape Escape as intended from the ground up, with the inventory you get per level, and never easier or flashier as you go, just more puzzling, complex, and liable to trouble. It's a game where you're always given problems. This game is stressful, it's frustrating, it's alienating. It's really not designed in any traditional way for you to be the best action game pro tag you can be. And yet, it's this weirdly and compromisingly designed action game that anyone can have the patience to complete from start to end. And that's what makes me really love it. Because for as much degrees that the game introduces for things to possibly go wrong, it only makes those pivotal degrees to strike where things can go right all the more enticing to want to land. I think what helps the game from feeling clunky or cumbersome is that while every action in the game does technically have a delay or motion-based procedure to execute them, it's never enough to make them feel sluggish. It's there only to add a slight bit of drama to your input, that you can't swing at things multiple times willy-nilly, and that you do have to put some thought into the right time and place to start a strike with your stick, and if you'll have enough speed and precision to perform that move and achieve what you want on screen. It actually helps that not everything in the game is super responsive or quick to help you recognize where you did go wrong with a missed strike, making it very intuitive to course correct and not strike at the same direction, but maybe a bit further to the left or right to strike at something just right. It's honestly a more forgiving style of play than you'd think, easier to miss, but not harder to learn from. Landing your net at a runaway monkey has that classic arcadey punchiness and rewarding feedback, like the feeling of hitting your weapon at any enemy in a traditional action game. But I think what makes every catch in this game, from the simplest ones to the more try-hard catches you can try to shoot for, is that the catch was done specifically because everything about time and space with a problem lined up perfectly in your accord to make that catch possible. because there was hardly much streamlining to get you that victory. Virtually every upgrade in this game is in some way or another designed to enhance you on paper, but ultimately makes things more complicated for you in practice. When you have this much responsibility over the controls, it's a triumph when you do manage to score a win, because it was all you in the end. This may not be the most deep or self-expressive action game out there, but it is one where the responsibility and resolve of yourself is more important and illuminating than ever. If this were Super Mario or Link Z-targeting monkeys for the win, I don't think it'd be as effective. Playing as Spike, who has no business being in an action game, achieving the most freaky collectathon job out there with no gimmick or twist to make him incredible at that role, outside of having more and more pressure put in his hands and inventory, is precisely what makes this such a classic. Ape Escape is a problem. Its combat and enemies are problems. It's a game about a bunch of problems. But what makes it so enticing and addictive to play today is the chance to act as its solution. Granted, this is both a triumph and quite an outlier to why you'd want to pick up a hot new 3D action game from the shelves. I don't think everyone out there was clobbering to get every game after Ape Escape and using the Dualshock scheme to do attacks with the right analog stick from now on. And frankly, I think only huge nerds like me, familiar with action game greats, will find some novelty and appeal to what it's doing. Kind of feels like the 90s equivalent of Princess Peach Showtime to me, a cute and lovingly crafted tribute to the action genre, where you're pretty firmly aware throughout its entire campaign that it's not made to set the world or genre on fire. And I also do recognize that not everyone is gonna root for the underdog or a kid as their playable hero, probably why they changed the theming of the game during development from centering around the kids to focusing more on the funny, memeable monkeys. And as I mentioned, a big part of playing this very academically structured action game is that you have to stick to its curriculum, which can make the combat feel like it runs on a flowchart. You can only catch monkeys with this weapon. To stun them, use this. To get higher or run faster, use that. Gadgets are designed here with a singular purpose, and rarely have a secondary usage for combat or catching. This isn't an open world simulator where you can scheme with your inventory and come up with crazy operations to outsmart a monkey. That'd be Ape Escape starring a grown-up, which wouldn't really make it feel like Ape Escape anymore in that regard, would it? One major hole, though, you risk falling into with a flowchart type of gameplay is when there's something easy for players to exploit, which Ape Escape unfortunately carries in the form of its stealth mechanics. You can crouch and crawl towards people monkeys so they don't immediately run away into a panic upon your sight, and to make catching them easier. Pressing both sticks down will put Spike in a fetal position that practically makes you invisible to any monkey. And I think you can see the problem here. Stealth snaps the core of the gameplay in two way too easily. Now you could argue the trade-off to doing stealth rather than going on foot and letting the chase go on is slower gameplay. But ultimately, when you're not on foot, people monkeys will hardly ever notice you, even when you're around their peripheral cone of vision, making this tactic very easy to exploit and use because of how it almost always works in your favor. Of course, there are some monkeys that you'll have no choice but to be caught on foot or to offset some action set piece, and there are a handful of moments that will make you consider if it's more efficient to stealth catch a monkey or test your luck and straight up gun for them on foot. But the pros of stealth outweigh the cons pretty much every time, and I'd even go as far as to say that it feels like a very un-Ape Escape feature, a move that makes the game easier for you, rather than exposing you to the potential of pros and cons you gotta factor in on the fly. Hell, catching monkeys while crawling uses the push of a button to swing in front of you. What is this, a mainstream action game? I didn't ask for this. Now, it's not a particularly bad mechanic, and it does fit in thematically with the hunting aspect of the gameplay, but it does feel pretty ungraceful to the game's design and the level at how much you can rely on it. But hey, on-foot hunting and catching is where it's at. It's still really fun. even when you do have to go by a particular rule set, because again, getting that rule set down in a chaotic and perilous environment and enemy type will be the spice and wrench that gets in your way. And sifting your way through that mess to land your rule set is what adds to the professional feel and reward of the combat. You're essentially playing babysitter to a bunch of misbehaving brats, wrangling them to bed when playtime is clearly over. Which does address another snag to your standard action game expectations, that there isn't really much of an enemy that rivals or tests or threatens you in this game. The enemy of Ape Escape are problems, but not evildoers or targets that really want to put up a fight. They just want you to leave them alone. They're literally problems, nuisances, overblown drama that you're ready to let bygones be bygones. You're not an executor of people monkeys, but they're active guardians. You even get a cute encyclopedia cataloging every monkey you catch in the game with a unique name and descriptor. Which does mean overall that the combat and objective of the game can be very repetitive and not really made to upend the challenge into a new unique stage or anything. You'll always be catching monkeys the same way, even if they are armed with guns or pyrotechnics ready to back you off physically. There are many bosses in the game that do test you to use your gadgets to deal hits to a larger enemy's health bar and strategically combat them with blindside hits, which are really refreshing bookends to the chases you normally do. But it's interesting that almost all these fights rely on entities that aren't a people monkey. You'll always treat a people monkey as the same one and done problem. I would have liked to see more advanced people monkeys that were maybe more resilient or pushed back your monkey net protocol in some surprising way. And not just monkeys that are inherently more challenging because they have guns or because they're on some high up hill or because they're a mecha pilot. This is where I think the game rears its weird middle ground between weapon-based game and collectathon game. Because while you do have to fight every collectible, it's never so much a fight that's more than one-sided. And you end up treating collectibles as what they are, one of a mass of collectibles ready to be stuffed in your pocket dimension after you trade fisticuffs. But it is that fisticuff element to this collectathon that makes Ape Escape so special. It's what makes every people monkey encounter unique from the last in some way. But some more leaning into that offensive challenge and potential would have helped break some of the monotony that inevitably comes from its collectathon roots. Which I think gives some further rationale as to why the game is built on a progression curve the way it is, to not give away how repetitive the gameplay can inherently be right away, and to scale with the difficulty of the monkeys and types of levels they hide in naturally, and ultimately why I think the endgame and final boss Spectre turn out the way they do. Before we get into endgame spoiler territory though, I have to point out right now one very strange decision that was included in this game. A shonen rival character. So during the outbreak of the time machine at the start of the game, Spike gets separated from his best friend Jake, who was tagging along with him to see the professor and his time machine. And once they're introduced to Spectre formally, it is also revealed that he has brainwashed Jake into being his minion. And this isn't like him being strapped with a peak point helmet to make him evil, which honestly could have been a really cool idea to see how a helmet affects not just animals, but humans too. But no, here he's hypnotized with evil red eyes to serve Spectre for no apparent reason other than to be a jerk rival that cuts off Spike during his journey sometimes. And these aren't one-on-one fights where maybe Jake has his own arsenal of gadgets designed by Spectre made to counter your current toolset. These are just races to the finish, where you can obviously tell he's cheating. That ain't how the jumping physics of this game work for me, big dog. And to top it off, you'd think these would be a prominent thing in the campaign, but these only last for like 2 levels in the whole game. Why is this here? Did they really think they couldn't make a beam katana wielding protagonist without including someone from their past out for their blood for no reason? I guess the point they're trying to make here is that humans can inevitably side with the peepos, which doesn't really go anywhere because of how it falls flat in the gameplay department. Or perhaps they're trying to create a bully archetype to a kid growing up that picks on them when they're trying their best. Or even a good friend of yours with a very raw, competitive side to them that gets in the way of your good friendship with them. But the problem is that we don't know anything about this guy outside of he's a kid who knows Spike and now he hates him. It's kind of baffling to me how well they build up the origin and tension of the innocent people monkeys and Spectre as villains, and yet they completely fumble here with an Ape Escape shonen fanfiction shoved into the campaign. A dumb villain only here for the sake of having a villain when they really should have put all their effort into the excellent way they are already handling their main villain. Remember how I said the people monkeys are a nuisance, and the first playthrough limits your collection by only allowing you to catch a minimum number of monkeys? Well, the reason for the latter ties in with the former by the endgame cleanup. You're given a gadget that, for once, makes your job easier by heavily stunning people monkeys upon contact, and it's used to break objects or barricades in the environment you couldn't access before, allowing you to collect monkeys that were previously gatekept from you. There's an argument to be made that this is a weird fusion between Banjo-Kazooie's free-flowing collectible system and Mario 64's boot-out system, where you have the freedom to catch as many monkeys in a stage, but only a particular number of monkeys before you're booted out, even when you have the knowledge that there are monkeys out there you can still clearly catch. Normally, I'd also have a massive grudge against that, but I do think that stipulation ultimately pays off with how easy and breezy and kinda bittersweet the endgame starts to feel. I will say before we get into that the base playthrough ending ramps up in the way you'd expect. You've been chasing Spectre and the monkeys across progressing periods of time, but when you finally reach the present, the people monkeys have already won and invaded humanity. The levels here are about going undercover in the present, more accustomed to you above ground, which helps add into the difficulty of these penultimate levels, until you finally reach the peak of monkey hubris, Spectreland, an amusement park level where the attractions are, as you'd expect, death traps you have to endure, and where Spectre has kidnapped the professor and Natalie to drive your frustration further. Though again, I do want to point out another pretty glaring misstep of this game that you can't really turn your eyes from: the roller coaster segment, where the lack of draw distance goes from a sense of mystery and challenge to straight up bullshit, how you can't see barricades to jump over from 2 feet in front of you, where you'll have no time to react to them whatsoever. Level bad, but otherwise this is a pretty engaging final level set piece. I especially like how this stage represents Spike's first physical encounters with the professor and Natalie. Makes you think about how, for the most part, Spike has been going through this game mostly alone. So getting to meet the people that have been training and encouraging him the whole game via telecommunication in person for the first time is really sweet. What the professor has to say to Spike at this point of the campaign in particular is also pretty moving.
I'm so glad to see you, and glad to see you're safe. You've gotten stronger.
Thanks to your gadgets, Professor.
No, the gadgets don't contain any real power. It's all in how you were able to use them. The true power is inside of you, Spike. You've grown, you've learned a lot, and you've truly become stronger.
It's like the game is congratulating you for sticking with its weird setup and how you've personally grown alongside it the whole time. And yeah, while I don't really think Jake is used effectively at all as a rival in this game, it is kind of touching to see how ecstatic Spike gets to reunite with his best friend. All these encounters help build up your resolve to get this job done as you started, entirely on your own terms. These guys aren't going to back you up or deal with Spectre on your behalf. They know that you're responsible enough to face him yourself now. And when you do reach the top of his space fortress, hiding at the outskirts of the amusement park, Spectre tries to brainwash Spike with some futuristic beam as a last-ditch effort, only for Spike to slap him back with some words of wisdom.
I don't want to! I won't! Wow!
What's going on? My powers! Why aren't they working?
I'll tell you why.
What?
Power alone isn't the true strength.
Power alone isn't the true strength. In other words, just because you have power and technology on your side doesn't make you superior as an individual. Spectre and the monkeys use power to be foolish and cause problems, but Spike throughout the entire game uses the power of technology to solve the problems they leave behind. It is a very blatantly shonen moment to be like, yeah, your power has no effect on my real power, and it is the only real nugget of literal character development we do get from Spike, but it is a hearty one, and one that really works for me because of how much it reflects the gameplay you've been learning from scratch up to this point, and even how characters have identified how much you've changed and grown for the better as you've gotten good at this game. It's just a great punchy reminder of the real dynamics of this game. Humans can grow and outsmart the problems in front of them, while the people monkeys cause problems and think they can get away with it. Which absolutely holds true even here, because Spectre yet again runs away after your fight with his giant robot. And while Spike is safely returned to the present with his friends, the game laments that there are still monkeys and Spectre out there, and Spike, in a post-credit scene, acknowledges that he can go out there and finish his job for good, going back in time intentionally to collect the rest of the monkeys and not let Spectre truly get away. This was the first game I ever played where I truly wanted to complete it, mostly because of that excellent motivation and drive to finish the job, but also because that post-game job is actually pretty easy, like I said earlier. There are a few revisits of previous levels that do make you go deeper into its depths and face some more challenging puzzle segments and environmental challenges to catch leftover monkeys, which were pretty cool, and admittedly the kind of setup I wish was in every level in the post-game. Because otherwise, for the most part, there are only a handful of monkeys left in these totals, and they're pretty easy. Get to the place you couldn't get to before, and bam. Part of me likes to use this deliberate setup as leverage for why a New Game Plus feature would be seriously killer for this game. To catch every monkey in every level in one go from start to end, with everything you know, how badass would that be? But then I'm reminded I'm not a badass. I'm not supposed to be a badass when playing Ape Escape. I'm a kid who had to learn to struggle and now has to learn how far this weird job has taken its toll. I think this post-game cleanup and the monkeys overall never acting as more than a nuisance are very intentional. This was a sport that once puzzled and frustrated you, being in foreign worlds and intimidated by a mass of monkeys, but now those worlds are vacation spots to you, and that mass is slowly dwindling. This problem is almost cleaned. Now, to put things into perspective, I have a close friend who's an avid fan of Ape Escape, who once told me that completing the game and getting all the monkeys made him feel a bit sad as a kid, knowing that the monkeys were nearly gone. And now I kinda totally understand what he's talking about. The apes, as much of a problem as they were, are a funny problem. They're a lively problem. They gave life to these levels and this game. They're the reason for your enjoyment of this game and its combat. And now that's all coming to an end. Action games starring professionals usually end with a send-off, saying that they'll continue fighting the ongoing forces of evil, even after that brief period of calm they've earned. But Ape Escape really goes out of its way to express how close to closure you're getting. You've learned and went through so much to learn this crazy job, and it's all been building up to catch every single monkey, up to the very last one. which culminates in the final encounter with Spectre here, where he's secluded himself to the deepest regions of space, simply wanting to be left alone. But when Spike arrives to catch him, not out of opposition or frustration, but simply because he wants Spectre to get back home safely with the rest of the monkeys, it does end up bringing out a curious and sentimental side out of him.
Ugh, you're so naive.
I'm still better than you are.
Yeah, give it a rest. You're still only human. But one more thing.
What now?
How was the man that raised me?
What? You mean the trainer at the amusement park?
Yeah.
Why do you ask? Were you thinking about going back? I think that's a great idea. Everyone will be so happy. I'm sure if you apologize, they'd welcome you back to the amusement park. Let's go.
Spectre realizes this was a big mistake that was all his fault, and kind of shows some regret and longing to go back to the way things used to be, which I think is the perfect way to end Ape Escape and to end a commentary about the game and its combat. It was fun while it lasted, but it's time for it to all stop, and it's time for us to all move on. So what if right-stick attacking or sentient collectibles no longer became a mainstay for modern gaming? This was a weird and crazy summer job you decided to take that along the way taught you a thing or two about what it means to work your way to the top and be responsible as an action game protag, to be persistent and take pride in what you can do, even if you aren't the most talented or destined one. You took this job to solve a problem. You've dealt and rationalized with it every way you can, to a point where even the problem itself recognizes how much of a problem they've become. And now it's time to clean that up and catch the nefarious Spectre like any other peepo in the game, with a well-timed swing of your net. And after that, life goes on. Go back to playing your mashy combo string action games with a variety of goons, but always remember what you've taken away from simmering down to being a student of professional ape catching one faithful summer break ago.